At 6:14 local time, the tone inside the A-10 cockpit shifts. Not a sweep, not ambient noise bleeding through the system. A lock. The pilot's eyes drop for less than a heartbeat to the threat display, then pull back outside where they belong. Two fast movers are already visible ahead. Dark shapes cutting clean lines across the pale morning light hanging over the Strait of Hormuz. A third sits lower, wider, closing from the right rear quarter. Not transiting, not wandering through, moving with deliberate intent. The radio holds silence for one full breath. Then the pilot keys the mic. Three fast movers. Iranian profile. I am boxed. Below him, the water looks hard. Blue steel under a sun still climbing. Merchant traffic sits scattered across the shipping lanes farther south. But here, in this particular slice of airspace, geometry is compressing by the second. The A-10 is low, stable, and heavy with fuel. Built to absorb punishment, built to stay in the fight, not built to outrun a trap laid by three fighters who got there first. The lead Tomcat crosses high, left to right, far enough out to send a message without committing to anything. Wings swept back, silhouette unmistakable. The second hangs off the A-10's left shoulder, slightly above, pinning the Warthog to its present line. The third stays back, patient, offset right, close enough to matter, far enough to react to whatever happens next. Another pulse floods the cockpit from the radar warning receiver. The pilot does not answer it with anything resembling panic. He trims the nose fractionally down and keeps the jet pressed low over the water, holding speed, holding discipline, holding the thing that matters most when the geometry turns bad. In moments like this, every movement is a transmission. Every bank angle, every throttle adjustment, every foot of altitude surrendered or defended says something to the pilots watching from outside. And right now, the wrong message says only one thing. Weakness. A sharp voice cuts into the frequency. No shouting, no theater, just pressure, delivered clean. Unidentified American aircraft, alter course immediately. The A-10 pilot answers in the same register. Flat, professional, carrying nothing extra. Maintaining present heading, the lead Tomcat makes another pass. Closer this time. Not close enough to collide. More dangerous than that, close enough to force a decision. Its wake rolls through the air ahead of the Warthog's nose, a deliberate disturbance, a test to see whether the slower aircraft will climb, brake, or flinch under the disruption. It does none of the three. Inside the cockpit, the pilot's left hand stays quiet on the throttle. His right makes a small, considered correction. The airframe shudders once, settles, and keeps moving forward. The sea flashes below, so close the lower section of the canopy fills with reflected glare. This is not a dogfight, not yet. This is shaping. The Tomcats are not diving in for a clean kill shot. They are building a structure around the Warthog, one aircraft forward, one lateral, one trailing, a moving cage assembled from angles and timing. If the A-10 climbs, it trades clutter for a clean radar picture. If it breaks hard left, the wingman closes the door. If it holds a predictable line too long, the trailing fighter inherits the timing. The pilot understands exactly what they are doing because he would construct the same cage in their position. A second radio call breaks through, distant, clipped, American. Axeman 2-1, picture confirms 3 bandits in tight formation. Support is not immediate, say state. The answer comes back without delay. Fuel good, space bad, no wasted words, nothing to spare. The lead Tomcat drifts back across the nose again, lower this time, the second inches closer on the left, enough for the A-10 pilot to catch sunlight fracturing off the canopy and the grey flash of the fuselage sliding past. The third holds its position at the edge of the threat envelope, just outside comfort, just inside consequence. The warning tone shifts again, stronger now, more stable, more deliberate. At 6:15, the walls tighten, the pilot drops another 50 feet. From any distance that would look like madness. A combat aircraft hugging the surface of one of the most congested waterways on the planet, while 3 fighters work the geometry around it like handlers working a pen. But lower means narrower angles for everyone. The Tomcats still own the speed, still own the altitude, still own the initiative. Low altitude steals options from all of them equally. The lead Tomcat reacts by widening its arc. The second hesitates a fraction. The third begins a slow, quiet creep inward. The A-10 pilot reads it not as separate maneuvers, but as a single pattern. Pressure from the front, containment from the side, closure from behind. They need him high, or they need him predictable before something else enters the picture. Neither of those things is going to happen on his terms. Then something appears on the far edge of the display. Not rescue, not yet. A seam, a narrow strip between the outer boundary of coastal radar coverage and the interference generated by civilian traffic pushing through the strait. Thin, imperfect, probably short-lived. But there. The pilot studies it for less than a second. Another Tomcat crosses the nose. Another lock tone pulses through the headset. He keys the mic one more time. I see one gap. At 6:15, the A-10 goes lower still. The altimeter unwinds in small controlled increments. 50 feet, then less. The sea fills the bottom half of the canopy now, hard blue broken by white wakes and the long morning shadows of shipping traffic working through the strait. At this altitude, there is no room for instinct, only precision. The Tomcats adjust without hesitation. The lead fighter pushes forward and right, trying to seal the nose. The second holds high on the A-10's left shoulder, threatening the turn, making it expensive. The third holds back, offset, patient, watching for the first unforced error. Together they are no longer simply surrounding the Warthog, they are authoring its next move. Inside the cockpit, the warning receiver keeps pulsing, not constant enough to declare a committed shot, which would almost be easier. This is controlled, intentional. The kind of sustained radar pressure designed to erode discipline 1 second at a time until the small cracks start showing. The Iranian voice returns to the frequency. American aircraft, you are entering restricted airspace. Turn north immediately. The A-10 pilot does not argue, does not request clarification, does not waste a syllable on theater. Negative, maintaining course. Short, flat, professional. Ahead, the lead Tomcat drops lower than it had on any previous pass, nearly level with the Warthog now. The move is not an accident, it is designed to dirty the air. Its jet wash sweeps across the A-10's nose, and for a moment the airframe shudders in the disturbed flow. The pilot counters with the minimum stick pressure required to bring the aircraft back into clean air. No abrupt pull, no reactive flinch, nothing sharp enough to register from outside as distress. That discipline matters more than it might appear. In a constructed trap like this one, the first visible overreaction is the opening. It is where the cage stops being theoretical. At 6:16, the left side Tomcat edges inward, not to a firing solution, to a psychological one. The pilot can now distinguish the fighter's wing geometry and the dark canopy catching light as it holds station off his shoulder. It stays there for 3 seconds, then 4, trying to compress the psychological space before it compresses the physical one. The message underneath the maneuver is simple: climb, brake. Give us something we can use. The A-10 gives them nothing. He holds the low line and keeps the nose pointed toward the thin corridor he identified moments ago. A narrow seam between commercial traffic and the harder outer edge of the air picture. It is not a clean exit route. It barely qualifies as a route at all. But it is the only piece of sky that the trap does not fully own. A clipped American transmission cuts through the static. Axeman 2-1, additional tracks remain cold. No friendlies in your immediate stack. Recommend hold low. Repeat, hold low. The response is immediate, affirm, staying in the mud. This is where the Warthog begins to become a genuine problem for the fighters surrounding it. Not because it is faster, it is not. Not because it is more agile, it is not that either. Because at this altitude, over this water, with this much radar clutter and civilian traffic building ahead, the Tomcats are forced to recalculate the intercept geometry every few seconds. Fast fighters own the open sky. Down here near the surface, speed becomes difficult to deploy cleanly. Every pass costs more, every adjustment requires more precision. The lead Tomcat figures it out first. It widens, then cuts back across the nose again, trying to herd the A-10 away from the shipping corridor. The second mirrors from the left, tightening just enough to suggest a closing wall. The trailing fighter begins pressing from the right rear quarter, betting that cumulative pressure will eventually fracture composure. The box continues to tighten, then the world ahead starts filling up. At 6:17, the first merchant vessel comes fully into view off the nose. A massive dark hull driving north through the strait, white wake boiling behind it like a scar on the water. Two more contacts sit beyond that, staggered across the lane. Civilian traffic. Slow, predictable, and tactically useful in ways the fighters above did not choose. The A-10 pilot does not angle toward them recklessly. He begins a gradual drift, just enough to position the nearest hull between himself and part of the Iranian geometry. Not cover in any traditional sense. Interference, visual complexity, radar noise, a moving piece on a board that was cleaner 60 seconds ago. The Tomcats react simultaneously. The lead goes wider than before, unwilling to press too low and too fast across the bow of a merchant vessel with all the surface turbulence and reflection that brings. The left side fighter holds for a half beat, forced to manage its own separation. The trailing Tomcat accelerates, trying to close the gap before the lane gets any denser. That half-beat hesitation is the first real crack in the structure, not a break. A loosened grip. The pilot sees it and keeps doing the thing that is hardest to sustain under this kind of pressure. Nothing dramatic. No hero break, no climbing reversal, no sudden change that announces itself. He stays down, moves forward, and lets the geometry keep shifting around him without chasing any of the openings prematurely. The Iranian voice is back, sharper now. Alter course now. The pilot answers without effect. Unable. At 6:18, the lead Tomcat makes its most committed move of the encounter. It slices low across the A-10's forward quarter, close enough that the decision has to happen in real time. For 1 second, possibly less, the Warthog pilot sees only fighter, water, glare, and the distance between them shrinking faster than the options. Jerk high and the fight is handed over. Brake hard left, and the wingman gets what he has been waiting for. Freeze and the closure rate finishes the sentence. He chooses none of those. Instead, he nudges the Warthog lower and right, a disciplined deflection barely off the Tomcat's expected intercept line. Enough to preserve control, enough to ruin timing, not enough to announce itself as desperation. The aircraft moves forward, ugly and steady, exactly as it was built to do, under exactly this kind of punishment. Behind him, one of the Tomcats overshoots its ideal spacing. Not by a wide margin. Good pilots do not make wide margin mistakes. By exactly enough. The front wall disappears, the left wall stretches, the rear pressure stutters. For the first time since the lock tone began, there is air in front of the Warthog. Dirty air, narrow air, temporary air, but air. The pilot glances once at the corridor ahead. More wakes, more traffic, more clutter, and enough space to force the fighters to keep working harder than the trap was designed to require. For the first time in 4 minutes, the cage is not seamless. At 6:19, the A-10 drops lower still. Not recklessly, not in a moment of desperation. Deliberately, with full knowledge of what the altimeter is reading and what the surface below will not forgive. The aircraft settles into a razor-thin band of air just above the water, so low that the texture of the sea starts to register through the canopy. Swell lines, white caps, fractured light bouncing off the surface in long angles. At this altitude, the margin for error is measured in feet. Not in tactics, but this is where the Warthog begins to shift the entire shape of the engagement. The Tomcats still own the speed, they still own the altitude. They no longer own the geometry. The lead Tomcat tries to rebuild the front wall, widening and then cutting back from the right to seal the nose again. The left side fighter holds its position, waiting for the error that has not materialized all morning. The trailing Tomcat creeps closer from behind, betting that rear pressure combined with everything else will finally produce the climb it needs. Inside the cockpit, the warning tone sharpens again. The pilot hears it, registers it, strips the emotion away from it. His eyes stay outside. Ahead, the nearest merchant ship is now large enough to interrupt the horizon line. A dark steel mass driving through the lane with the kind of indifference only very large objects can project. Beyond it, 2 more civilian vessels move in staggered formation through the strait. Not a shield, not safety, just clutter, heat, metal, motion, and enough variables to fracture what had been a clean 3-ship box into something that requires constant recalculation. He keys the mic. Traffic ahead. dragging them through it. No answer comes. There is nothing useful to add. He is already doing it. At 6:20, the lead Tomcat descends lower than it wants to. That is the tell. Fast fighters are built to rule vertical space. To treat altitude as stored energy they can spend at will. Down here over water, near civilian traffic, every correction costs more than the one before it. Every pass has to be cleaner. Every overshoot becomes more consequential. One wrong angle and the pilot is not just out of position. He is too low, too fast, and too committed to recover cleanly. The A-10, by contrast, is exactly where it was designed to live. Low, stable, and brutally honest about what it is and what it will do. The lead Tomcat cuts across the nose again, trying to push the Warthog away from the shipping corridor. This time, the A-10 pilot holds the line until the last clean moment, then makes a shallow right adjustment that preserves the aircraft's energy, keeps the wings level, and denies the fighter the angle it was building toward. The Tomcat flashes past, too wide, too fast, too clean to convert. The left side fighter immediately compresses inward to restore the wall. For 3 seconds, the trap looks whole again. Then the merchant ship's wake rises beneath them. Broken bands of disturbed air and reflected glare twist the picture the Tomcats had been using. The trailing fighter checks its descent a fraction of a second early. That fraction is sufficient. The pilot sees the opening and does what trained pilots do at their best. He does not chase it emotionally, he uses it mechanically. Throttle steady, nose low, wings level, he keeps pressing forward through the gap. At 6:21, the trailing Tomcat makes its hardest push of the entire encounter. It drives in from the right rear quarter with real urgency, trying to convert sustained pressure into a genuine firing solution before the lane becomes too crowded to use. The warning receiver responds immediately. Cleaner now, more focused, more serious than at any prior point. For the first time, this feels less like a calculated intimidation sequence and more like a prelude. The pilot's breathing tightens once, just once. Then his gaze moves forward and left. The dark mass of the first cargo vessel is crossing through the battle space, now like a moving wall. Its hull, its exhaust stack, and its heat signature tear through the clean radar picture the Tomcats had been working from. Not enough to save the situation outright. Enough to force them to solve the problem from the beginning again. The A-10 angles toward the edge of that interference, not under the bow, not through some suicidal gap between hull and water. Just close enough to plant doubt. The lead Tomcat reacts by climbing slightly to preserve the sight picture. The left side fighter drifts wider to maintain its separation. The trailing Tomcat, the one that had been pressing hardest, now has to decide whether to continue the close-in push at low altitude near a civilian vessel or give up the closure to preserve spacing and safety. It chooses spacing, only for a moment. That moment is enough. A distant American voice breaks through the static. Axeman 2-1, support is now moving. Time still not immediate, continue current game plan. The A-10 pilot answers in 5 words. Current game plan is surviving. The merchant vessel slides past beneath the left side of the canopy. The Tomcats are still there, still dangerous, still armed with every performance advantage the sky offers. But their structure is no longer seamless. They are flying 3 separate intercept problems instead of one coordinated trap. That is the shift. Not victory, not escape. Leverage. At 6:22, the left side Tomcat tries to correct the situation by driving harder into the pocket. It comes in fast, trying to recover control of the geometry before the next vessel in the lane adds even more noise to the picture. For one dangerous second, the fighter looks precisely positioned. Then the A-10 pilot executes the move he has been building toward since 6:14. He does almost nothing, a tiny altitude reduction, a slight drift right, a refusal to break upward. The Tomcat's timing comes apart. Not dramatically. Good pilots do not make dramatic mistakes. It goes just long enough to lose the exact angle it required. The front wall disappears. The left wall stretches outward. The rear pressure wavers. For the first time since the trap was assembled, there is open air in front of the Warthog. Dirty air, narrow air, temporary air, but open. The pilot watches a new symbol blink onto the far edge of his display. Friendly vectors, distant but moving. The Tomcats see it too, and now the clock begins running against them. 3 fighters had cornered the A-10 over Hormuz. Now they have a decision to make: close the box or leave before the sky changes around them. At 6:23, the sky begins to change. Not visually, not yet. No dramatic silhouettes materializing on the horizon, no wall of American aircraft pouring into the strait. Just a shift in the radios, a shift in timing, a shift in how aggressively the Tomcats are willing to press. Inside the A-10 cockpit, the pilot catches a calm voice cutting through the static. Axeman 2-1, friendly fast movers inbound from the south, still minutes out. Hold your line, minutes. In a clean air-to-air engagement, minutes can feel like room to work. In a low-altitude running trap over the Strait of Hormuz, minutes are an eternity measured in individual mistakes. The A-10 stays where it has survived best all morning, down in the hard blue layer above the water. Nose steady, throttle disciplined, wings close to level. The shipping lane ahead remains cluttered with civilian hulls and fractured wakes. Behind and around him, the Tomcats are still present, still armed, still capable. But the character of their pressure has changed. They can feel the clock now. The lead Tomcat climbs several hundred feet, just enough to widen its view of the battle space. That single movement says more than any radio call. A fighter that had spent the last several minutes forcing the nose shut is now buying perspective instead of closure. The left side Tomcat holds farther out than before, preserving options rather than squeezing. Only the trailing fighter continues pressing with genuine urgency, wanting one final chance to convert the geometry before the picture shifts permanently. At 6:24, that chance arrives. The trailing Tomcat accelerates from the right quarter and begins driving in aggressively, trying to collapse the remaining distance before American support enters the frame. The warning tone inside the Warthog sharpens to its cleanest, most focused register of the entire engagement. For a long moment, it feels less like harassment and more like a decision being made by someone behind that canopy. The pilot does not look down at the instruments. He already knows what the machine is telling him. Instead, he studies the water ahead and the silhouette of another northbound tanker sliding into the lane. It is not where he would have chosen it to be. It is exactly where he needs it. Another moving obstacle, another source of glare and exhaust plume and surface interference. Another reason for a fast-moving fighter to hesitate. The Tomcat closes. The A-10 does not break upward. That choice matters more than airspeed, more than bravado, more than anything a spectator expecting a cinematic resolution would anticipate. Because the high brake is exactly what the Iranian pilot is engineering. High means silhouette. High means clean radar. High means the Warthog stops being a low, ugly, complicated problem skimming the surface and becomes a proper aerial target. The A-10 declines the invitation. The pilot stays glued to the lower air, uses a shallow left drift to adjust the closure angle, then slides back right enough to maintain separation from the tanker's wake. To anyone without the training to read it, the movement would barely register as maneuvering. To the Tomcat trying to complete the intercept, it is a door closing. The geometry keeps shifting. The trailing fighter goes long, not by much, by enough. Axeman 2-1, picture update, says the American controller. Friendlies now 10 miles south, reduced. They are pushing hard, 10 miles. That means something now. The lead Tomcat knows it too. At 6:25, it makes one final attempt to reclaim the structure of the fight. It rolls back down from its elevated perch and cuts across the A-10's forward quarter, left to right this time, trying to rebuild the front wall before the southern picture arrives and closes the window permanently. The pass is sharp, disciplined, and genuinely dangerous. For 1 second, the trap looks whole again, only almost. The left side fighter is holding wider than at any prior point in the encounter. The trailing Tomcat no longer owns the rear closure with the same confidence it brought to the engagement at 6:14. The 3 aircraft are still coordinated, but not seamlessly. The A-10 has dragged them out of clean air and into a shrinking window. A new voice cracks across the radio. American. Closer than before, Axeman 2-1, continue heading. We have your north side. That is the moment the Iranians lose the initiative. Not because weapons are employed, not because missiles appear on the rails, because the air picture has shifted. and every pilot in the airspace understands it simultaneously. The lead Tomcat checks its descent immediately. The left side fighter climbs half a step. The trailing Tomcat breaks its hardest line of pursuit and opens up laterally, avoiding the prospect of being trapped between the Warthog below and new arrivals closing from above. For the first time since 6:14, there is open water in front of the A-10's nose. Not safe water, open. The pilot takes it. No dramatic burst of power, no triumphant transmission. He simply follows the heading he has been defending for nearly 10 minutes and moves through the gap before it can close again. At 6:26, the first American fighters enter distant visual range from the south. Small dark shapes against a brightening sky, still outside immediate merge distance, not needing to be closer. Their presence alone finishes what timing started. The Tomcats begin to separate, not a panicked retreat. That would be unprofessional, and these are not unprofessional pilots. A controlled, measured, reversible withdrawal. One climbs, one turns east, one lingers for a final moment at the edge of the engagement, then follows. The Iranian trap is over. The A-10 pilot allows himself one quick glance upward, enough to confirm what the radio had already told him. Friendly air in position, upper layer owned. He keys the mic. Axeman 2-1, clear of immediate box, continuing south. The answer comes back without delay. Copy. Keep moving. We have the top. At 6:27, the Warthog clears the kill zone it never allowed to fully become a kill zone. Below, the Strait of Hormuz keeps moving as though nothing happened. Tankers hold course. Civilian wakes stretch white across the blue. The sun climbs another increment. But up here, in the thin layer between restraint and disaster, the message has already been sent and received. 3 Tomcats had cornered an A-10. Then the sky changed. The Warthog was out of the corner, not yet out of danger. At 6:27, the trap is broken. Not destroyed, not reversed, broken. The A-10 holds low over the Strait of Hormuz and keeps moving south, steady and unhurried, while the first pair of American fighters settle into the upper picture behind it. Above and to the east, the 3 Iranian aircraft are no longer pressing as a unified cage. One is climbing away to regain altitude. Another is drifting east with controlled separation. The third holds for a moment longer, watching, measuring, determining whether the window is genuinely closed. It is. The radio confirms it before the sky fully does. Axeman 2-1, friendlies established. Continue egress. The A-10 pilot answers without inflection. Copy, continuing. This is how it ends in actual military airspace. Not with cheering, not with a one-liner delivered over gun camera footage. A pilot gets the aircraft out of the threat band and hands the upper layers to the force that is now positioned to own them. Behind the scenes, the second half is already running. Every radar sweep, every lock tone, every radio exchange, every heading deviation is being archived. Friendly sensors will reconstruct the Tomcat approach patterns. The timing between front closure, lateral containment, and rear pressure will be pulled apart frame by frame. The moment the lead fighter widened, the moment the left side aircraft hesitated over clutter, the moment the trailing Tomcat pressed beyond its ideal spacing and lost the geometry it needed. None of it evaporates. That is one of the quiet truths of modern military encounters. Even when nobody fires, everybody leaves a record. By 6:31, the strait is widening behind the A-10. Civilian traffic continues on its scheduled routes, indifferent to how close the airspace above it came to something irreversible. Tankers push north. Wakes spread white behind steel hulls. Sunlight plays across the water. The world below keeps moving because the men above it kept this from becoming something worse. That matters too. Restraint is consistently misread by people who have never had to hold it under real pressure. Restraint is not passivity. It is not an absence of options or will. It is control applied at the moment when the temptation to abandon it is strongest. On this particular morning, control was the deciding factor in every exchange that mattered. The Tomcats had the speed to threaten. The A-10 pilot had the discipline to endure, and discipline applied in the right piece of sky is stronger than aggression that runs on a clock. At 6:32, the pilot keys the mic for the last time in the segment that defined the morning. Axeman 2-1, stable, out of immediate threat, simple, final, professional. The controller answers with equal economy. Copy all. That is the full accounting. 3 Iranian Tomcats held an A-10 Warthog inside a closing trap over Hormuz for 13 unforgiving minutes. The kill geometry was real, the pressure was real, the lock tones were real, the danger was real, so was the pilot inside the Warthog. 3 fighters had the speed, they had the angles, they had the numbers and the initiative and the performance advantages that should have made the outcome straightforward. For 13 minutes over the Strait of Hormuz, the A-10 pilot had the one thing that proved stronger than all of it: control.